Maverick says, Cafe, don't you believe in free will? And Cafe says you're a compatibilist. Cool. I think I agree with a form of a compatibilist approach to free will. I recently wrote an article on it called Free Will and Determinism. So if you're interested in my thoughts, check out answersinreason.com and just have a look for free will and determinism. I'd be really, really, really interested in folks' thoughts on that one because unlike these two, I am a layperson. So I try really hard to raise myself to their levels, but I must admit I'm nowhere near their knowledge and understanding. So it'd be really great to have people there poke holes in it. But I have admitted throughout the article some holes in my understanding. So perhaps you can provide something as well. Leon confirms that yes, it was the justified true belief. Yeah, fair enough.
Love
Seeing as we
reading your.
sorry,
Sorry. Continue.
I was just going to say, seeing as free will has come up, what's your thoughts on free will?
It's more in the compatibilist side. I've set aside that question constantly. I just focus on what I like to focus on in philosophy. You don't have to love all of philosophy to, or have time to study all of philosophy.
There's so much to study that it would be almost impossible to have an opinion on every single philosophical idea.
Yeah.
I know everybody probably it's going to be a growing number of veganism in the future. I'm predicting that, but I'm setting aside any like contemplative work on that for right now because I would like to focus on what I want to focus on.
Yeah,
Makes
no,
sense.
definitely. I mean, especially as you are working towards something specific as well. So
Super
you're,
specialized.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. So you're not going to have such a general approach. Whereas me, I just start thinking about things and start having conversations with Dave, and Dave goes, "You need to read this, 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 and this," and then I read it and go, "Dave, I don't understand."
Well,
I
I
do.
have sort of a general idea of lots of stuff because my master's and my undergrad was really broad, but I tend to focus mostly on things like ethics.
Which is
I
probably
have
why that's why I talk the most about ethics as well, because that's most of the conversations we have.
reading your blogs though because they're exactly what people do need in terms of the bridging the gap between academic and layman understanding. Um, I have my foot camp in two different worlds, being a machinist and trying to study something more academic. I deal with coworkers that after high school they just went to trade school and stuff like that. So like yes, they have a good understanding of trig, but if you try to have a conversation about Socrates and Euthyphro, like it's going to glaze over on their eyes. But like if you try to explain like a Gettier problem in terms of a clock in a room, it clicks into their heads pretty quickly.
Hmm.
Yeah. It's one of the things I'm trying to practice at the moment. Like you say with the blog, I'm trying to find a way to kind of bridge that gap where, because I figure if I can explain it simply, it kind of reinforces to me that I have a rough idea of what I'm talking about.
It's Feynman's was it one of his virtues he said is if you can explain it to um, a fifth grader, then it shows that you actually truly understand the
Yeah. If you can explain it in the simplest of terms, then you know what you're talking about, basically.
Hmm. A couple more comments have come in. So Maverick, nice to see you here, by the way, Maverick. Says, I'm unable to grasp how free will does not exist when we evidently do have a choice. Well, the compatibilist approach is that the universe is deterministic, but we do have a limited sort of free will. So it's not like a libertarian or non-causal free will. So I think the three of us here would agree that we do have some form of free will. However, people that argue against free will would make statements like you are completely trapped by things like your biology, your knowledge, your experience, and everything like that. So every choice you make is the choice that you would always make. You have the illusion of free will, the illusion of choice. You wouldn't ever choose anything like that. Now, obviously, that is none of our positions, but that's just trying to explain to you why someone would say that. And if you do think about the universe in a purely physicalist way, where everything is done by the laws of cause and effect, then that is why you would have that argument. But I would say that a physicalist determination doesn't necessarily impact our psychological determination, because it can be shown that whilst you can explain the mind in physicalist terms, there is something more to it than that.
Yeah. The determinism thing basically comes down to the idea that physical events cause physical events. Um, the physical causes the physical, and all that there is physical causes and physical effects. And the mind is mental, and therefore it doesn't. The mental properties have no effect on the physical properties. They are affected by the physical properties. So how would we have any form of free will if mental causation can't affect physical processes?
Interesting. He says you think it's virtually impossible to prove determinism. The science right now sort of leans towards the deterministic nature of the universe, with at the quantum level it being more probabilistic. What we don't know is if it is actually probabilistic or there is a deterministic cause that we're not aware of. So if you say it's virtually impossible to prove determinism, I mean, that is the way science is leaning at the moment. We've also got a new person in the chat as well. Uzi Alku says, until you need it to justify Kalam. In what way? Sorry, that seems a little bit out of the way. I think the Kalam is a logically valid argument. I just don't think it's sound. There's issues with the premises. I'm happy to go through my thoughts on that with you if you like. Also, if you want to listen to how I've already gone through it, we've got a video called Knowledge and Certainty under the Fresh Air playlist. Not Fresh Air SciPhi, just Fresh Air. And we go through the different theories of knowledge, which is quite relevant to how the conversation's gone. And then I address, or we address, should I say, the Kalam and the teleological argument, and what was it? The ontological argument, I think, at the end. So yeah, not that I'm trying to send you away right now, of course. I'm happy to have the conversation if you're interested. You should look into Michael Hoffman's ego death theory, which I think you can find on Google. Are either of you aware of that one?
No. And also, I'll be 2 minutes. The dog wants out.
Okay, that's fair enough. So Maverick says, yeah, I do. It makes sense. I do agree that we have free will, but it's limited. Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's the way I lean. I think that's the way a lot of people who look into free will actually end up reasoning, but they have very different forms of compatibilist theories as well. They all justify them in different ways. So it's very an interesting topic, but it's one of those ones as well that you can get lost thinking, because there is no decent answer to it. It's, you can't make a statement and go, well, it's definitely that. Which is why I can understand why you, Opie, don't actually address that one that often yourself, because it's a bit of a waste of time with the goals that you have.
One thing that I think I have addressed, because now that you're getting me thinking about it, it's me as an individual, even if my mental processes are determined, they're still mine and not anybody else's. And therefore, any of my actions are still morally culpable to me to some extent.
Yeah, I have.
And other people can't be blamed for my action.
Yeah.
Other at least once we otherwise we would just be a Borg hive, like the Borg, and we're not the Borg.
See, I do agree with you there that they're almost that if all there is if we're living in a hard deterministic universe, it does almost remove agency from morality. So morality in a hard deterministic universe has no real meaning in the way that we currently understand morality because it assumes agency. But you still have to make people, as you say, culpable for their actions. Otherwise, everybody might end up doing negative things. That's why we almost need the laws in place, because there are some people that don't have the same sort of moral compass, and will do these bad things. Yeah, I mean, that's the other impact on free will is I think I am biased towards having some free will because I don't like the idea that morality means nothing. So catching up again, Cafe says, do you mean it's impossible to prove hard determinism as opposed to an adequate determinism? Hard determinism is more fatalistic, that all action is etched in stone. Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, if you actually look into determinism, hey, hello, Papa. There is determinism, predeterminism, and fatalism, and they actually split up. So determinism is, cause and effect. Predeterminism is everything has been decided in advance. So for that, you'd almost need to have a deity that had decided the plan. And fatalism is more along the lines of it doesn't matter what you do, the next thing will happen. So it doesn't matter if I pick up this spoon or I pick up this glass, the next big event won't be changed and I'll knock over this regardless of whether I pick up a spoon or a glass. Or, I mean, that's a really overly basic way of explaining that one.
Okay. I think a good answer towards this would be your sense experiences are not always determined. They're sometimes underdetermined, or at least my recollection of memories, or my attempts to explain what happened just 5 minutes ago is underdetermined in some way. And because of that, every second in the current present is still maybe determined, but the future isn't. So your decisions on that based on your past experiences.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I'd almost say that the more experiences you have, almost the less free will you end up with, because we often say old people get set in their ways, and can't teach an old dog new tricks and all those sorts of things. And that's almost like saying, once you get to a certain point, your choices become incredibly limited. I had a family member who, in her old age, she basically, it was a what's it sandwich every single lunch. That was it. That was what she had, because that's what you have at lunchtime. There was no choice left, and if she didn't get a what's it sandwich put in front of her at the right time, it was all sorts of problems.
What is a what's it sandwich?
What's it's a crisp or a chip like Cheetos.
Fair enough.
But yeah, that's what she used to love. But you can sort of see that. Whereas you compare it to an infant, obviously one that can move around, so maybe a toddler, they have so little knowledge, so little experience, so little understanding that you can't even tell them not to touch this thing because it's hot, because they won't understand and they'll touch it and they might touch it again and touch it again and because they don't have that sort of knowledge in there that tells them. Whereas you get to an adult and you go, well, no, I'm not going to touch that because it'll burn me. And technically that's removing a choice from you because you have the understanding there. Anyway, in terms of science leaning that way, can I ask you what your thoughts are on orc or? I don't know. Do you know what he's talking about there?
I've heard of it. Maybe
Yeah.
read
I've not heard
read
of
the
it.
chat.
Yeah. So unfortunately, Maverick, we can't give you an answer on that one right now. But if it's something you're interested in having a discussion about, I'm sure that we can spend some time looking into it and give you an answer in the future. None of us are afraid to say that we don't know, as has just been demonstrated. And sorry, we don't know. Maverick also has responded to Cafe saying ego death is definitely a concept I look into because it fits in with some of my studies on the source of immorality. It refutes the concept of us being able to act and suggests that we only react and then creativity shouldn't exist.
It has to do with philosophy of mind. It's orchestrated object reduction is what or and just a cursory look at the Wikipedia. It's the objective reduction of biological theory of mind that postulates that consciousness originates at a quantum level inside neurons.
Interesting. Well, I mean, if it's then at a quantum level, that the quantum realm, as far as we know, is probabilistic rather than deterministic. So that would then tie in to the fact that, you know, if it does originate there and it does scale up from there, then that would also indicate that we do have a form of free will because we have our most probable action, but we might not necessarily do it. I mean, that's... Sorry, go ahead, Opie.
We could look at this more at like it's difficult to use examples that we use in science for explaining, like theories to explain natural processes in this regard, but it's kind of like we can use Newton theory on macro scale objects that are not going super fast, but we can't use it on the super tiny and we cannot use it on the super fast. We have to use some other form of what's it called, paradigm. But we can probably reduce consciousness all the way down to the naturalistic way, which, I mean, it yes, definitely. But when you extrapolate it back up to some pragmatic way, it probably is explained in a different paradigm, you know, and or at a less tedious way.
Yeah, I definitely have to look into it more. I mean, I've just given a brief answer on, you know, limited understanding. Definitely something for me to look into and address in a future stream. It's great. I like it when people pose questions to me that I don't know the answer of because it means I have to do some more research. So yeah, he explains that quantum consciousness by Sir Roger Penrose and Stuart Hameroff, as you mentioned. Evidence has supported that via experiments using anesthesia. Interesting. Definitely interested in that then. I will have a definite look into that then. Thank you. It's always great to have people bring up stuff like that. So yeah, I'm with you. It sort of ties into how I think of free will anyway. So it's nice that there's actually potentially some evidence that supports it, even if it's not conclusive. It's quite nice. So Cafe says that's why I'd recommend reading Belskar. The hard determinist simply sees any desire as inevitable, that while people think they're doing things and making choices and exerting their desires, in fact, according to the hard determinist view, no such thing has happened. Everything is according to a divine will, or if you're not partial to the religious term cosmic law. So on both of those, I think you're almost going between predeterminism and determinism. I'd say if it's done by a God's plan, then it's all been predetermined. Otherwise, it's just happening sort of through the laws of cause and effect. Then it's determinism. both of them are much of the muchness. So that's the problem with things like hard determinism. It's basically you have the illusion of choice, the illusion of free will. And obviously, if you take a fatalistic approach, it doesn't matter what you do, the end will happen anyway. So it's not necessarily that your actions are completely determined. It's the conclusions of each action are determined. So, and Maverick says it also suggests consciousness is related to vibrations of microtubules as opposed to neurons. I've subscribed. Looking forward to hearing your thoughts on Orca. Yeah, wicked. Thank you for the subscription as well.
Thank you.
Always good to have someone there. Someone subscribe. Yeah, hopefully, you can even come on and have the conversation with us as well, because it sounds like a topic that you've actually looked in. So whilst we will look into it ourselves, perhaps you can school us.
What I studied doesn't really have neurons surviving over millions of years. So my philosophy of mind and my neuroscience is very limited to just some introductory classes rather than, an expertise in this field.
Basically functionalism. No, I'm the same. My philosophy of mind is basically limited to things like Chalmers, Papineau, and functionalism and things like that.